So we have in our gospel today this story, this beautiful story of Lazarus being raised from the dead so that he could be physically with Mary and Martha again. But some read this story and perhaps think, well, whoop-de-doo, good for them. But what about insert whoever? What about the people in my own life who have died? I want them restored to me. Good for Lazarus and Mary and Martha, but what about... And I think of people that I know who have lost children, whether through miscarriage or as infants or as adults. What about them? And yes, sure, heaven, but I want them here with me on this journey of life. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died, said Martha. So what do we do with that? Of course, there's the phrase, the verse in there, the shortest verse in the entire Bible. And Jesus wept. Jesus wept. And why did Jesus weep? He knew he would raise Lazarus from the dead. So why did he weep? Of course, others said, oh, he clearly loved Lazarus, and they didn't know he was going to raise Lazarus from the dead. And Jesus wept. But I think he wept because of his movement of compassion for Martha and Mary, and not just them, but all humans' experience of death, the whole reality of death. He wept for a whole experience of that reality. In fact, he was so moved that we humans live in this reality of the shadow of death, that's why he came into the world, to ultimately free us from death. That's our great hope as Christians. That Jesus is stronger than death. That's the whole gospel message, that we need not live in fear of death and fear under the shadow of death. Because, of course, Jesus entered into death to make it a pathway, a doorway into fullness of life, to life eternal, to the fullness of heavenly joy. But, of course, while we're on earth, we're not quite there yet. As human beings, we still live, as Christians, we live in the already and the not yet. Already Jesus came to rescue us from death, to pave the way to heaven for us. But while on earth, we're not yet in the fullness of that reality. Certainly, we begin to have a foretaste here and now. In prayer, that through our prayer, through the Mass, through the sacraments, we encounter God, and we begin to experience that communion, that mystical communion of the saints with all those who have died. But not yet are we in the fullness of that. We're still on the journey. And we experience death. And Jesus weeps. That when we love, we open ourselves to be vulnerable to be wounded when we lose the one we love. And so what's the answer to, my heart could be more safe if I didn't love. But of course, that's not what we're called to. We're called to love and risk being wounded by that love, especially when the one we love is lost to us, or at least seems lost to us through death. This is where it's important that Jesus wept. Because Jesus enters into our full human experience of the grief, of the loss, of the suffering, of all of that. He enters in and shares in that in our humanity. And then at the very heart of it all, of his saving work, is his own wound of love. That he became wounded for the sake of love for us. wounded by the very ones that he loves, because he loves and is perfect love. Thus, he opens himself most fully to be wounded. I think there's something so important to that in the heart of our worship, in the heart of our life as Christians, really in the heart of the world and the whole cosmic universe, is this self-giving, this wound of love of Jesus, who's wounded for love and gives himself in love for us. That we hear those words, it becomes sort of the cosmic center of everything, of our worship, of the whole world. This is my body given up for you. This is my blood poured out for you. So when we experience the wounds of love, temptation is to turn in on ourselves, to sort of cut ourselves off, to shield ourselves so that we won't be wounded again, to close off our heart. Or, what we're called to as Christians is to unite those wounds of love with the one who is wounded love itself, with the God who enters in, who most fully opens himself to be wounded, because he is love. To unite ourselves with Jesus, who enters into our experience, who weeps with us and for us, and is wounded for us, and who says to us, this is my body given up for you, this is my blood poured out for you. Because that's when we become wounded in love and unite our wounds of love with him who is the wound of love. It's when we begin to know something about Jesus, who is the resurrection and the life. That we bleed with wounds that don't simply take life away, but wounds of love that pour out life, that give life for others.